What's going on, everybody? Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News, NFL columnist and Giants beat writer with the Believe Network, as well on the Talkin Ball live Q&A with you, NFL and Giants fans, fresh off of, well, not necessarily fresh, but off of my trip from Indianapolis for the NFL Combine, and excited to bring you guys the latest from what I'm hearing, what I know, the rumors, the gossip from everything in the back hallways and restaurants and bars of Indy out in the Midwest. Thanks for being here. Rick, Giants Chronicles, Antonio, all of you guys in here to kick us off. Really appreciate you joining me. We are here, of course, on Mondays at noon and Thursdays at 9 p.m., twice a week during the NFL offseason. And of course, I just want to start off before we talk Giants and NFL with, sad news, obviously, Chris Mortensen passing away. A titan of the industry in the newspaper and television business, obviously known most for his work on ESPN, but and I'm sure a lot of others listening and watching, grew up on and really got a lot out of watching everything that Mort did, how professionally he carried himself and how much he means to so many people in the business. So wanted to start by saying, condolences to Mortensen's family and to all those who lost a great friend. And the business will always remember and memorialize what Mortensen brought to the board. A lot to learn from how he carried himself and how he did his job. So let's get to your questions. Just want to tell you about Bet Online, and we'll jump right into all the Giants and NFL news and nuggets. Bet Online continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favorite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to become part of the team, and remember to use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joey B, Jake, Hunter, I see you guys all jumping in. Good to see you guys. Rick Bowman says football has March Madness to Happy Monday. That's right, Rick. The NFL, 365 days a year now, basically, other than mid-June to mid-July. We are going strong, and we are basically going daily, and no shortage of lots of chatter in the hallways of Indianapolis because, there's always the NFL Combine and the prospects on the field, and that's what the public is seeing on television. But then regardless of whether it's a strong draft class or not, there's always a ton of free agent chatter going on in Indy, agents and teams, executives, coaches, whatever the case may be, you're bouncing around. There's a lot of people who work in the business who aren't necessarily with a team or in the media who are also drifting around, conducting their business, and lots of chatter exchange back and forth. But this was a really buzzworthy and buzzy week in Indy because there was both the quarterbacks at the top of the draft and an exciting draft class from the offensive linemen to the receivers at the top. And then, free agency is going to be busy. And obviously the Giants are in the thick of that. Rick says, terrific interview with Xavier McKinney last week. What's the latest on the negotiation? Rick, I did hear, the safety market is supposed to do pretty well this year compared to kind of bottoming out and disappointing last year. Antoine Winfield with the Buccaneers expected to cash in possibly, at home with the Bucs. The Bucs, I heard, making him a priority. If he gets a deal, this is, the chatter that I heard, could he end up, supplanting that Derwin James $19 million a year number at the top of the safety market and get into the 20 million and reset that market? We'll see. Obviously, there's always the price that the agent is looking for, the price that the team is willing to pay on both sides. There's the franchise tag to consider for any of these younger players as well. But if let's just say hypothetically that Winfield, is up there at the top of the market or resetting the market, then that bodes well for what McKinney could get paid. But it also, does that take him out of the range that the Giants are comfortable with? And therefore, do they end up using that transition tag as they have threatened to do? And I use the word threatened because, they say it's an option, and it's certainly a team's option and right to do that if they need to. But also from the player's perspective, we know from that interview I did with McKinney, he doesn't want that to happen, which is nothing new from a player's perspective. But Giants had to be delicate with that coming off the Saquon Barkley negotiations last year and how that was handled, and how the player reacted to that before kind of coming back in and putting his head down and hitting the ground running. But of course, the locker room still talking about it. So I think, the Giants like McKinney. McKinney clearly, as he told me, wants to stay a Giant as long as the money matches up right. That transition tag ends up coming in, I believe, just under $14 million. The problem with that from the player's perspective is it can suppress the market because teams don't want to do, the work for the Giants necessarily. Like if the Green Bay Packers are going to negotiate a contract with Xavier McKinney come March 11th, but then he can just take that back to the Giants or has to based on the transition tag, and the Giants just say, okay, we'll match it. Then, teams don't want to do other teams' work. And so does he end up getting a lower number because that's how it gets handled? But I do think, the Giants need to exercise their leverage, obviously, to keep their team together. But to answer your question, Rick, I think where we stand right now is the Giants have that option at their disposal, but I think they should be able to get something done. They don't want to carry, they want the flexibility to carry a lower cap hit on a guy like McKinney, a guy who's homegrown, who they really believe in and they value. So if you can negotiate a multi-year deal, you can carry a much lower cap hit this season and then kick some money down the road, because we all know the Giants need to be able to assemble a certain team here and now. So because of that, I still think they get something done. You look at a guy like Cam Curl. Like, let's say if Cam Curl comes in, in the 12 million or a year range, let's say, and Winfield's going to push that, top of the market number 20, can McKinney fall, right into the middle there? Does he fall a little bit closer to Curl in the Giants' eyes, and he would rather be closer to Winfield? Do you get into, understanding that there's an obvious middle ground and compromise there in the, $14-15 million range, and then, and then kind of handle it that way? To me, it doesn't feel like there's too big of a gap to bridge there. And I think even though we are coming up as we talk now on this live Q&A here on the YouTube channel at PL on NFL, as we talk now, we are about a little bit more than 24 hours away from the franchise tag deadline. And so that's where McKinney stands as of this moment. I think motivation to get it done. They just had their big meeting with David Mulugheta, McKinney's agent, on Friday. And so I actually am continuing to work the phones and work the information on exactly where it stands leading up to tomorrow, Tuesday at 4 p.m. But, definitely motivation on both sides to get something done. And I think as the safety market is shaping up, it seems like there's an obvious range for them to both meet at. Chronicle says, Pat, what's up, man? Have you heard anything in regards to the Giants wanting a quarterback, free agent receiver market, corners poking around? How have Xavier McKinney talks gone? Saquon, anything of importance? Woo! All right. Chronicles, a lot of questions here. Chronicles, I'm going to get into what the Giants are looking for at quarterback. They're very much studying the quarterbacks in this draft. I've said that before, say it again. Shea Tierney, the quarterbacks coach, was on the field working out the quarterbacks at the NFL Combine. Remember, he was offensive coordinator at the Senior Bowl, working with the quarterbacks there. Has seen guys like Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Joe Milton from Tennessee up close. Size is certainly a part of the Giants' consistent value and evaluation of quarterbacks. So, guys who are profiling as the, height, weight, speed, the profile, the prospect type that the Giants typically are looking for at the quarterback position. You look at, Drake May, Joe Milton. Those are both guys with size. McCarthy's more of a 6'2", but clearly the Giants showed some aggressive interest in working him into even how their offense runs during their meeting together. And McCarthy's buzz is only getting hotter. A team like the Denver Broncos maybe likes him. Tashawn Reed at The Athletic just reported that the Raiders are looking to come up from, I think, number 13 overall, possibly for a quarterback. So a lot of action in that draft market at quarterback. Still haven't nailed down who the veteran QB signing would be if the Giants go that route, which Joe Schoen has talked about multiple times, as far as bringing in a veteran to complement Daniel while also possibly drafting a quarterback of the future to develop. So, still looking at the quarterback and free agent wide receiver market. To address Jake's question as well, along with yours, Chronicles, were the Giants actually going to be players for Mike Evans if he hit the free agent market? It's a player they checked in on, but sometimes, so when you're doing your work on all these positions and the team's connection to them, they have these meetings and you glean interest in certain players at the top of certain markets versus the middle of other markets. When they check in on a player like Mike Evans, that indicates interest. But, the realistic possibility that A, he was going to leave Tampa, and B, that the Giants were going to be able to afford him, those were not realistic things. And so the encouraging and interesting thing is that the Giants are poking around the top of the wide receiver market. Now, Joe Schoen's going to do his due diligence at the top of any market where the team has a need. But, for example, I reported in the Daily News over the weekend that the Giants' premier positions emerging, where it looked like Joe Schoen was prioritizing and possibly going to pay, were offensive guard and edge rusher. And Jonah Jackson of the Lions being one of the players that the Giants like. Not only but could compete in the market for him, where there's teams like the Carolina Panthers, the New York Jets, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe, another one, the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you're going to compete with those teams for those types of players. There's also Robert Hunt from the Dolphins is at the top of that market, possibly Michael Onwenu from the Patriots, though it's hard to see him getting out of there. But those were two positions that not only emerged to me where the Giants but where they could actually spend the money for the player. Now, Danielle Hunter could be really tough to get because, like Mike Evans, can a player like that, because of where he stands in the market, end up just becoming too expensive? That's possible. Josh Allen, Brian Burns, those are guys who coming up on the free agent tag deadline on Tuesday, March 5th. Those teams have the ability to franchise tag those players and keep them off the market altogether. The Vikings do not have that ability with Danielle Hunter, who hits the market if he doesn't, negotiate a deal to stay in Minnesota. And so the Giants have expressed interest in him. And, maybe it's more likely that they're in the ballpark of being able to sign a Jonah Jackson than a Danielle Hunter when everything's said and done. But they're checking in and doing more than checking in on those positions and the tops of those markets. They are players in those markets. Now, does Mike Evans and the fact that they checked in on a Mike Evans, does that mean that they would sign a Michael Pittman if he comes out of Indianapolis? To me, that's another player who, if you're Shane Steichen and the Colts, and by all accounts, my understanding, having some conversations about Pittman is, really good dude, really great guy that the Colts love as a person and not just a player. And so it's hard for me to see him coming available. So this is also what I try to do with you guys too, is now you're not going to have 100% hit rate, obviously, but you try to also bring names to the table for people to understand that not only is there interest here, but there's a realistic chance that the team could get this guy. So we'll see where that stands. But certainly being in the wide receiver market, as the Giants are, making these calls and having these conversations, that means that they're not just looking at receiver in the draft. They're also looking at it in free agency. And typically, whether a team leans harder versus free agency versus the draft at a certain position as part of the plan, you either have a need at a position or you don't. And so, the fact that they would be drafting a wide receiver at 6 and not also checking in on receivers in free agency, obviously you're doing both in that scenario. Now, where the guard thing developed with Jonah Jackson is, my intel that now, obviously there's been a lot of conversation back and forth, and it's very possible that in the end, Evan Neal doesn't work out at right tackle and does end up getting kicked inside to a guard spot. But from what I understand, the Giants really do want to give him another crack at right tackle, before using that last resort of kicking him inside if they need to. And so if you're doing that, yes, you're still looking to pay a veteran tackle to come in and compete and either be the swing tackle behind Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal, or to compete with Evan Neal and take that job from him and then create those other possible scenarios. But my understanding is they look like big game hunters in the guard market. They are big game hunting in the guard market versus, let's say, saying Evan Neal's going to be our left guard right off the bat, and we're going to go pay a big time tackle instead. Now, that also bleeds into what do they do at the top of the draft with a guy like Joe Alt, with some of these receivers, with the quarterbacks. A lot of options for a team like the Giants who have a lot of needs. Antonio, thanks for the questions. We talked a little bit about McKinney there with the Giants. And, I will say this. In addition to what we talked about with Rick's question about Xavier McKinney, and thanks as always for the questions, Antonio, and all of you. Typically, like if one of my reads on McKinney is that if it got louder as we got closer to free agency here, to me, it would reflect that the sides were really far apart. And I believe that even though coming out of those negotiations, there hasn't been a ton of, or really any public jockeying on the Xavier McKinney negotiations since Friday. I view that as a positive, talking to people about how that safety market is developing. And also, nothing has happened or no one has talked yet to reflect any dismay about those negotiations and how distant maybe the two sides would be. Now, like I said, I do think if the safety market goes the way that it may be headed, maybe that pushes the Giants to that franchise tag or that transition tag element that they've been talking about. But I still think that it seems like it's trending in a positive direction to them getting it done. But we'll see. Joey B says, "What's up? Checking in." Joey B, did I see that you won a belt? Yeah, he says you have a champion in the room. So how many competitors were in that, Joe? Joey was in I believe like a comedy show, right? And it's a contest that you've won before and that you were competing in again. Let us hear it, Joey, because I saw you with the belt on Instagram, which means that you brought it for sure. Jake says, any feeling on whether Waller has decided if he is retiring yet? I do think that, Darren's still thinking about it. And I would say this, like when something like that comes out, I think, no accusations of any agendas, but I'm just saying this is a player that Darren Waller is a player here that when this comes out that the Giants and Waller either think he's going to retire or that he molded, but now he's coming back, and then it flip-flops that, oh, yeah, wait, he actually may retire. All of that is conversation and chatter that, teams don't want players on the fence, and they know players in the locker room don't want players who are on the fence. And once it gets out that a player is considering retirement, usually more often than not goes the way of once you're thinking about it, you're already there. And from my understanding, I had one conversation about the idea that even going back to when he was in Las Vegas, that there was a question at one time of how much longer Darren may end up playing. And then obviously, remember, he signs that contract, gets extended in Vegas, but then it doesn't go anywhere close to the way they thought it was going to. And then he ends up getting traded to New York. But to me, this is a guy with a lot of, irons in the fire off the field. He is a thoughtful person. And, of course, the Giants, if they didn't restructure his contract, could have gotten out of it here anyway. Now you have some money rolling up on them. But I think that, the Giants, I could tell you, they're poking around on the tight ends. They have to improve the room anyway. But also, I think if you're the Giants, you have to plan on not having him at this point. And I think that coming out in some way reflects that, the Giants not only know that, but they also you want an answer on this kind of thing. Not that you're not going to do right by the player, but you do want an answer on this so you can plan for the future. But, more power to Darren, however he does it. Jacob says, Pat, is it me or is JJ to the Giants picking up steam? Jacob, that is picking up steam. I will say he was pretty uneven throwing in the early part of that on-field workout. He threw way better to his right when he got to open his body and kind of, that kind of half-mast 45-degree arm angle. He was much better throwing that direction and down the field than he was throwing across his body to the left when he had to throw to the boundary there. To be honest with you, I talked to several people who think that part of the reason I think he makes sense for the Giants, knowing what they want to do at the quarterback position this year, and also talking to people about where they think he could go. If you're looking at a developmental player to bring in late first, early second round, whatever it is, sit on the bench, develop, learn. You got Daniel starting. You got another veteran coming in to back him up and be on the field. McCarthy fits that mold to me. He does not fit the mold to me and some others I trust of a guy that you take in the top 10 and you're putting on the field quickly. I know plenty of people who don't see that, but I also hear a lot of chatter about, from people who really like him, who think that he's going to go way higher than someone like me and some of the other people I talk to think that he's worth top 10 versus, back of first, early second. Would Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos be a target? I know they've been connected to Bo Nix as well. Davis Webb, the quarterback coach and former Giants quarterback, was on the field working closely with these guys. So that's a team that is definitely not only in the market, but if the Giants, let's say, are in that market at the top of the draft and want to trade up, you have to look at, Denver as a team who maybe could get aggressive, even though I don't think they have many picks behind that first round pick until like later in the draft. So the Giants have more ammunition there. That's for sure. Let's see. Jake says, any free agents you feel strongly will sign with the Giants? Yeah, I mean, who knows who they end up signing at guard, but Jonah Jackson to me is a good fit who I know they also like. He is a guy who excels pulling out in space. Something the Giants love from their offensive linemen in this system, something that John Michael Schmitz does well, moving down the field at center. There were times that Jackson struggled in pass protection. I believe he had a cleanup of his meniscus late in the season in the playoffs, but there were reports then that if they had gone to the Super Bowl, he may actually be ready for that game. That's a guy I see as a distinct possibility. Antonio says, do you expect Danico Autry from the Titans to be a target for the Giants? He was a productive edge rusher for the Titans under Shane Bowen. Yes, I think at defensive end, Danico Autry makes a lot of sense and is somebody who I think is maybe the cleanest direct straight line you can draw in free agency from a player to a fit who would not completely break the bank. I think I looked at it the other day. I think he had 11 and a half sacks last year. I may be overestimating that number, but he had some good production last season in Tennessee. And that would not preclude you, by the way, from signing more players at that position, adding more talent there. But like for a great example of how free agency works too is like, would you go Danico Autry and a draft pick at edge if you don't pay for Danielle Hunter? And then let's say you're paying a guard and you end up paying a wide receiver, so you pay those two positions. So then maybe you then aren't winning the sweepstakes for a Danielle Hunter, but you're still signing Danico Autry, getting the draft pick, that kind of thing. So that's where the revolving doors, the plan A's and plan B's come into place. But yes, that's a very good point, Antonio. Jacob says, Pat, with the cut/release of Kevin Byard and with the prior connection with him and Bowen, is there any chance we see him as a backup option? That's a possibility, and maybe he would be more comfortable with the Giants in a familiar system with Bowen than he was joining the Eagles there, because Byard was not the same player with the Eagles that he had been, when he was obviously a standout for the Tennessee Titans, obviously an older veteran. Good player, respected player. But to me, the evaluation of watching him, in Philadelphia once he got there, he was not able to help them the way that they were expecting him to be able to. So I'm not sure that makes sense as a depth option and a locker room guy and somebody who could help people understand the defense. I can see that, Jacob, but was not, didn't love what I saw on the field. Hunter says, do you think McKinney would take slightly less to stay here? After talking to him, I definitely, it resonated with me, Hunter, how strongly McKinney felt about playing in the same place and really wanting to build with the team that drafted him and kind of push through the fire and through the storm, as he said, and then really understanding how much sweeter it would be to win here. He said, I'm not a quitter. I don't quit on things when times get tough. Like, I'm going to push through. He wants to get paid like a top 5 safety, though. So, Derwin, Minka, Jamal Adams, Jesse Bates, Harrison Smith, that's the top 5 right now. Justin Simmons comes in at 15.2. Then you have Budda Baker, 14.1, et cetera. Like, to me, if McKinney was able to get, over a Budda Baker. See, that's a difficult argument there too, right? Because now Baker's older and got paid on, under a previous salary cap ceiling and all of that. So it's not all apples to apples. But Budda Baker is one of the best, defensive players in the league when he's churning on all cylinders, right? So you look at McKinney wanting to be top 5, which means if we're going by the average annual value, that would be 16 million or higher. And then you have a guy like Budda Baker, who's 14.1, Justin Simmons, 15.2. That's why I think that middle ground there, we could say that's taking less than the top 5 number McKinney is saying and outlining, but maybe he gets to top 5 in other ways in the contract, whether it's guaranteed money or whatever. And so then his average annual value doesn't read that, but he gets to that in some metric. So that's why that range makes sense to me. And so, Hunter, I'm glad you brought that to us here, because that was certainly what McKinney articulated to me in that interview, was that his preference is clearly to stay in New York. And I think that means a lot in addition to everything else in that negotiation. Joey B says, if Waller retires, does that save us a bunch? And what's up with Saquon? If we trade up, what quarterback are you hearing? What about Russ as a backup to DJ? And also, I don't want JJ. He's Daniel Jones 2.0. Haven't heard anything about Russell Wilson and the Giants. I know you brought that up last week. I think his name keeps getting connected to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is that going to happen? Don't know. If Waller retires, I think if he retires, like if you want to say how does it help the team, right? I think in the sense that Darren clearly, even though he's a really talented player and a good dude, has struggled to stay healthy. And the Giants are well aware how frequently injured they are year in and year out. And last year, their gambles on guys like Waller backfired. And so it's impossible to ignore that injury history. And so having players at that position and at every position whose injury history does not either guarantee or make it more likely that the guy's going to be out again, you just, at this point where the Giants are and how desperate they are, you can't have guys that you're counting on to be high-end players who are never in the lineup or who are in and out of the lineup. It's just no way to develop consistency. And so that would be the way I would answer that question. The trade up quarterback to me, Joey, is Drake May. If like sitting here right now, I think Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams are 1 and 2. Obviously sounds more likely Caleb at 1, Jaden 2. Jaden, there are some people who think Jaden Daniels could go 1 and that he's worth that pick. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but there are people who believe that he's worth that. And so to me, at this moment, Drake May ends up being the 3rd quarterback off the board. And then the question becomes, what do the New England Patriots do? Because the Patriots are a team that, now I just wrote in the Daily News last week and talked to some people where it's just overthinking it, that the New England Patriots wouldn't take a quarterback. They need one so badly, right? And yet there's been a lot of chatter, and this is probably the most all over the board topic and conversations I had in Indy. But it's like, there's some people who think that New England would trade back out of that pick and still take a quarterback that they like later in the first after they get some return, and maybe they get an extra high pick and they get a position player as well out of it. So they get a quarterback and a position player in the first round rather than, or in the first and early second, rather than getting just one at number 3, knowing that there's such a rabid market for quarterbacks at the top of the draft and teams making those calls, looking to trade up possibly. Then there's people who think they're going to stay and take a QB, and I think May would be that guy if they stayed there. But if the Patriots are really going to trade out, I think the equation changes drastically for the Giants, maybe trading up there and getting a guy who profiles as their type of quarterback from a size standpoint, from a continuing to develop before taking over standpoint in Drake May. He makes a lot of sense, even has the relationship with Eli already. Works with David Morris, the quarterback's coach, and has that Eli relationship. We all know that the Giants are taking Daniel Jones, kind of the profile and the similarities and the way they saw so much Eli in him was a huge factor. So to me, that's Drake May. I mean, there is a lot of smoke with JJ McCarthy, especially with the Giants. I'm sure you guys saw, but in case you didn't, the Giants asked JJ McCarthy to give them a play call in their meeting in Michigan's verbiage, and then they translated it to the Giants' offensive system and had JJ calling that and getting a feel for what it's like in their offense. And that's like trying something on to see if it fits before buying it at the store. That's not really learning much of McCarthy as much as having him learn about you, right? So that really stood out to me as something that I think is something to keep an eye on. And listen, if the Giants end up drafting a quarterback at the top of the draft or not, they're certainly acting like they might, and like there's a good chance they will. But this is something to remember about this draft too. This is a strong draft at offensive line, wide receiver, these positions where it's not like there's a ton of attractive quarterbacks, and it's obvious that you need to take even the third or fourth or fifth one in the first round because there's a dearth of talent at these other positions. Like that's not the case. Like who doesn't want a Joe Alt on their team? Who doesn't want a Malik Neighbors on their team? Neighbors is a player who really excites me. I'm fascinated by him. Joey B says, if we trade up, I want either Daniels, May, or Penix. You would take Michael Penix that high with his injury history? Yeah, see, Joey, I think he'll go higher than people believe. Does that end up being like in the teens or the, early 20s in the first round, I think is where I'm thinking, more than as high as you're talking about for the Giants, unless it was a trade into the back half of the first to get him. But I wrote this in the Daily News too, and I do think this is worth pointing out. Like, Penix is a player who you talk to enough teams who are scared to death of his injury history, and it's not anything against him. It's just a reality. But he did stay healthy last year at Washington, and he's just been the best player at quarterback on the field wherever he's been this offseason so far after taking his team to the national title game at Washington, Senior Bowl, Combine, whatever it is. So I agree with you that Penix is going to go higher than people think. I don't think that high. With the injury history, but here's something to keep an eye on. And Joey, I'm glad you brought him up. Michael Penix Jr., I've talked to plenty of people who think that he is one of the most capable quarterbacks in this draft of stepping in right away and helping a team. So that could be, starting as the backup, but just, being ready maybe to run an NFL offense a little earlier than some of these other guys. So, some teams that make sense and that I've, that have been bandied about are like the Seattle Seahawks, like bringing him into that room behind Geno Smith, developing, maybe ready to help out if he needs to, keeps him in state. Miami Dolphins, they already have Tua, the lefty. Do you bring in another lefty behind him who, similar to Tua, not incredibly mobile, accurate, definitely a better arm on those outside throws, I would say, than Tua typically displays. But that makes sense. Would the Patriots target a guy like him if they trade out and trade down? Penix could be that type of player that teams are looking at in the draft. Hey, we're in the top 10. We want to move down and get more assets, but we also want a quarterback in the first round who can help us right away and also develop. Who is that? Is it Michael Penix Jr.? Somebody to look at. Mike Reese, also from ESPN, who is somebody to always read and pay attention closely to when it comes to New England. He just wrote a very interesting piece about a team like the Patriots. Is it like, from his standpoint, it was, yes, quarterback could be the answer at 3, but if it's not, everyone says, well, trade out is the thing. But Marvin Harrison Jr. was a player he profiled as, sometimes talent is just right in front of your face and you just got to add it to your team and use them as a stud building block, especially because Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo have spoken frequently this offseason about adding weapons. So again, New England is kind of they're the crux of a lot of how that's going to go at the top, in my opinion. Joey B says, if we lose Saquon and McKinney, then what are our best options and money-wise? Running back, there's a lot of guys available. And to me, it would be like drafting and signing one. Like if you signed a Devin Singletary out of Houston and then you drafted Bucky Irving from Oregon, let's just, add those two guys. You got a former Bills draft pick that Joe Schoen has mentioned by name this offseason on the record as somebody just last week as somebody who's attractive. And then Bucky Irving, to me, from Oregon, is a guy who really stands out. Pass catching ability at just under 60 catches last year for the Ducks. And Joel Thomas, who I know Rick has asked a lot about, the Giants running backs coach, was in the thick of it, helping run that running back drill and was zeroing in, standing there on the sidelines with his hands on his knees, watching the running backs as they ran a quick out route, caught the ball, secured it, and showed their kind of speed, agility, and ability to kind of control their body and balance, turning up the field. And I think that is something to keep an eye on. I know Marshawn Lloyd from USC, he's another player to watch there. And that's something to be aware of for sure if they don't re-sign Saquon and bring him back. I've said before, guys, I'll say it again because Joey's bringing it up. If you told me who's going to stay and who's going to go, my guess would be McKinney is still a Giant and Saquon is not. But as we are talking here and now, and you might be listening to this now on the podcast, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on Apple or Spotify or here on the YouTube page in the rewind form. And, the Giants do love Saquon Barkley as an organization. So if it comes to pass that they, end up, re-signing him or bringing him back, like all of the sentiment for him is there. But my reporting throughout this offseason, and even though Joe Schoen even mentioned the tag as something that's at their disposal still with Saquon Barkley, to me, where Joe Schoen ideally wants to allocate those resources, points in that direction. All right. A lot of questions here. Love it when you guys join in and help us kind of continue to build this community. I really do enjoy doing this, and what a turnout we have today. Man, thank you. All right, so let's get to the next question. Joey B coming in hot there. I love it. I'm going to get to G-Men in a second, but Joey B says he won the championship, 6 comedians vying for the top spot. I went before the return champ, and it was hard for him to follow. So now I'm a 2-time American comedy champion in a bar in New Jersey. Listen, Joey, I said to somebody the other day about, one of my friends who's hilarious. So sometimes you say one thing in a conversation and people laugh. And in the back of your mind, you say like, hey, I think I'm pretty funny, or that was pretty funny. And then you meet someone who's actually funny and they're funny all the time. Like they're funny when they wake up in the morning. They can't help it. They're just, making somebody laugh once. It's more of the anomaly for somebody like me, but Joey B clearly has it. And Joey, I told you, I'm going to make one of those shows, promise. G-Men 2011 says, if they don't take a quarterback this year, the Giants saying to everyone that they expect to be really bad next season and be at the top of the draft to take one next draft. Daniel Jones isn't the answer long-term. G-Men, I think a lot of teams don't expect next year's class to be very strong. In fact, I know that based on talking to, scouts and people in the league. And so, no, I don't think being at the top of next year's draft would be like, hey, now we're in position to draft one. Listen, G-Men, they can't afford to be bad. There's going to be major turnover at higher positions, at least one, if they are bad again. So that no, they do not intend to be bad. And G-Men, though, you're hitting on essentially the point. It doesn't make sense for them not to draft a quarterback this year. Now, again, I continue to say I think they want a guy that they can develop and who is not certainly the plan to play early. But that doesn't mean you're not taking a player at 6. But to me, it does mean that they are looking to invest in that position. When will the next time be that we hear from Shane and Dable? Is it the draft, says Jake. No, Jake, it'll be the NFL owners meetings, which are in Orlando this year in late March. Actually give you that date. We have, let's see, I believe Monday, March 26th or Tuesday, March 27th. One of those 2 days, we will hear from both Brian Dable and Joe Shane. And we typically hear from John Mara at those owners meetings as well. Obviously, haven't heard from John Mara as often as we would like to hear. Haven't heard from Steve Tisch in a long time. So that would be important. That'll be a week for you guys to circle on your calendars there. So that's the 25th and 26th, especially of March. And we'll have to see how we can get the live Q&A going optimally that week. We might end up either doing a Monday night, half-hour one from my hotel, or a Tuesday night half-hour one from my hotel to read and react off of some of the key comments made by all the Giants decision makers before I get right back downstairs to work in the phones and work in the hallways. Joey B says, Pat, I'm trying to get tickets to be at the draft with the wife. If I can pull it off, we got to get some dinner some night if you're out there. Joey, I actually stay in New Jersey for the drafts because I travel for everything else. But for the drafts, the Giants stay at their facility in East Rutherford. And so the way they run the draft is they don't go physically. They run it from their war room. And then we talk to them after they make their pick in the auditorium. And then we go back into the media room doing our thing while they're doing their thing. And so it's a very interesting dynamic, but I won't be on the road. But you should definitely go. That would be a blast. Jacob says, Pat, any idea who the Giants prefer between the big 3 receivers in the draft? This is just this is not a report that they like these guys over another guy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying based on what I know they like at the receiver position, like the explosiveness of Neighbors and of Harrison Jr. Like Adunze, is still a guy who produces and can go down the field and, provide some explosiveness. So it's not that he doesn't have that. It's not what I mean. But to me, like if you made me rank those guys, Neighbors to me feels like the more explosive element there, who is maybe slightly a tier above. Now, you can tell Adunze's makeup and his well-rounded ability. He's a kid who somebody is going to love to have on their team. So in the end, I don't know how that's going to shake out, who's going to still be on the board there. And I think Adunze's a really good player as well. But if you're asking me, I think Neighbors and Harrison Jr. would be 1-2, but I think that's probably the case for a lot of teams as well at the top of the draft. Especially you look at the Cardinals and the Chargers right ahead of them. Now, do the Chargers go offensive line instead of wide receiver? Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, who knows? Let's see. Yeah, Jacob wondering if the Giants go Brock Bowers if Waller retires. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, you wouldn't hate to have Brock Bowers, that's for sure. But would you take him over a top receiver? I don't think that is the way that, Joe Shane ideally would think and like to operate. Then again, last year he did go and get a tight end when he needed a top receiver via trade. But again, that was because the free agent wide receiver market was, not very good. is why he kind of resorted to that. So I still think unlikely it's Bowers over a top receiver there. But Jacob, I do think that's a natural question to put on the board and something to continue to study there. Let's see. OG says they'll save money if Waller retires. Yeah, you save some, but you still do carry some dead money there, I believe. I have to actually look into the consequences there, but I don't think all the money comes off the board for you. OG says trade Daniel Jones for a 6th or 7th round pick. It's funny. I do think that would be a really good result for the Giants and for Daniel Jones to go somewhere else. But we'll see. I mean, with this current ownership, I don't quite know if they would actually trade him. Playboy Phil says, could you see Trader Joe contacting Chicago and giving up a haul for Caleb Williams if they absolutely loved him during the top 30 visits, or do you think they stay at 6 for Neighbors? I don't think Chicago moves out of 1. Could Chicago get Washington to come up to 1 if, like, let's say Chicago wants Jaden Daniels and Washington wants Caleb, and, Chicago convinces the Giants and Washington, listen, we're going to go Jaden, so Caleb's available at 1, come and get him, right? That would be the scenario for that, I guess. That would be crazy, because they certainly need a quarterback. I think it's more likely the Bears end up making that pick because, and that it's probably Caleb Williams, even though I told you, like, Jaden Daniels, there's been some buzz there. But Ryan Poles just fleeced the Carolina Panthers to get this pick. And I don't think then you trade out of that again. But, of course, if you can maximize your assets and still get to 2 and get that quarterback, you create that competition maybe, and you tell teams that's what's going to happen. But, again, they wouldn't go to 6 there. They would go to 2 and still get their guy. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's likely. I think in that scenario, Phil, I think staying for Neighbors at 6 is more of the most likely, and what you just outlined. OG says, why not trade for Justin Fields and draft a receiver in the first round to use the rest of the picks to fill holes this team has? Not very enamored with Justin Fields. Maybe that's the fastest way to some competence at the backup quarterback position, but not quite a veteran who's reliable there either, right? Fields is a developmental guy, and I think publicly the perception of him is stronger and more positive than what it is in the league. So I don't think that's the scenario, but OG, I do think, what I love about these chats is, like, you guys are intelligent fans who pay close attention to the game and also to the league. And you guys understand that even if some scenario like OG just outlined doesn't work out, like, those things get you more than what you think gets pushed up onto the board and discussed by these teams, because they have to be ready for all of these scenarios, right? You have to be able to pivot. So I don't think that's what ends up happening, but I think your head's in the right place. Hunter says, does putting $1 million bonus for sacks go against the cap? Bonuses like that at end of season, I believe, roll up against the next year's cap. I think when you have like season end bonuses like that, I believe they end up going up against the next year's cap, and you push them that way, is I believe my understanding. I'll double check that, but that's my understanding. Hunter says, it seems like Caleb talent-wise is all but the extra baggage is very disappointing. It's hard to say. I mean, one sec. It's hard to say on that. He certainly is a bit different than some other guys we've seen in the past, but I think you hear more skepticism about the people around him than him. And I'm not sure there's a ton of concern about him as a person. I think it's more just making sure you have the right structure in place so that he's listening to the right people once he gets to your team. Like, he doesn't have an agent. He's got a lot of people around him who I'm sure are trying to do the best thing for him, but these guys do need to grow up and handle their own stuff, right? Giants Blue-Blooded says, do you think drafting a quarterback provides job security to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll for an extra 2 to 3 seasons minimum? I think that would depend, Blue Blood, on how the team does this year. Like, in other words, if it's atrocious this season, right? If it was a slight uptick, a drastic improvement, all those things, along with the quarterback draft pick, I think go along with maybe extending your window. I think if it's really bad again this year, drafting a quarterback doesn't necessarily mean that, it's going to extend your window. I do think that it's attractive for the Giants to develop a quarterback with a consistent staff and guys working with him. And if you do draft a quarterback who people in the building can tell early and right away, he's the guy. And, it looks like we have something special here, then that can go a long way to extending your window. I don't think it's a guarantee here, though. I think for Joe Schoen, it needs to be something that you look at as the ultimate building block for a long-term plan is getting a quarterback in the building you can develop. And so, the other pieces that you put in place around him and around Daniel Jones in the short term matter. But I don't think automatically it extends your window. But that's part of the thought process, Blue Blood, for sure, is that you're going to turn that into rationale for keeping some consistency on your staff as well. Joey B says, I just don't want JJ. I feel like he isn't the guy, developmental or not. If we draft him and have to develop him and then we stink and we lose our staff, then that's wash. Yeah, he's a controversial player right now, or, kind of a lot of debate around him. Hunter says, I think the Giants should pick a receiver or line at 6, then trade maybe this year's 2 seconds or something for into the first for Michael Penix. That's an interesting one, Hunter. I don't dislike that. Antonio says, anything that you have heard on other free agents like Ashawn Robinson and Isaiah Simmons? Nothing big there yet. I think the Giants are looking more at taking care of clearing, cap space and looking at like big fish in the free agent market before they address some of that. But Simmons would have been talked about in that meeting with McKinney and his agent. Player in person that they like. We'll see if he's a scheme fit for what they do. Wink Martindale, I think, was really smart about how he used Simmons strategically and how he worked him into the defense. Is there the same kind of opportunity for a hybrid like him to thrive in what they run under Shane Bowen? Possibly. But, we'll see. I mean, one of the things he really excelled at was being that guy who he could help you out in space at times, covering the running backs, but also really was unleashed as a pass rusher in some of those key blitzing spots that Martindale loves to send guys, from different areas and different angles. And so, possible that he's a better scheme fit with somebody else. Joey B says, is there any truth to trading Kayvon to move up? I've heard that. Haven't heard that. That would be a guy that would be trading your number 5 overall pick in a draft where you took Kayvon and Evan Neal 5 and 7. And Evan Neal still hasn't proven he can play in the league and handle the league. And then trading Thibodeau, that would be tough to rationalize from a Joe Schoen perspective. And no, I have not heard that. Joining late, have you heard any interest for Drake May, says Romans? Yes. I think the Patriots matter a lot there. And then you have to really look strongly at, let's be honest, like if you draft Drake May and a trade up to 3 or at number 6 overall, let's say you ideally want to sit him behind Daniel Jones for a year. We all know in New York, like when Daniel Jones starts going 3 and out and struggling in week 1 and week 2, everyone's going to say, why isn't Drake May in the game? Now that's an interesting scenario too, is just like with the Daniel Jones, Eli Manning transition. Let's say they drafted Drake May 3 or 6 and Daniel and the offense and the Giants struggle right out of the gate. That typically turns into a situation where the rookie quarterback gets put in the game anyway, because now the season's going down the drain. Might as well play the young guy, might as well develop him. But to answer this question that we had earlier, it's like, okay, well, where does that put everybody for the future? Because now you have a bad team where you still haven't fixed everything around the young guy. And now he's probably going through some growing pains, even if he's showing you some positives on a team that still needs some talent around him. So, that puts you in a tricky spot. Hunter says, I heard my guy Dylan Love out of New Hampshire had a bad combine. Is that true? Definitely, didn't profile as excitingly as some of the guys I mentioned earlier, like the Bucky Irvings and Marshawn Lloyds. Compact runner with some, strong technique and a guy who can help you in the passing game for sure, Hunter. But some of the elements of quickness that you need in the NFL to kind of cut and go, make that first guy miss, be interesting to see how much he can show teams in that regard. I do think, you could see how he helps a team, Hunter. And so, guys who produce, they've got that chip. He seems like he has that it factor to help a team. It's just a matter of, does he have enough of that explosiveness to be able to add to an NFL offense right out of the gate and help a team? That'll be something to see. I did like a lot about what he was doing, but there were other things where clearly he was just kind of behind some of the guys in the group. Joey says, you telling me you're coming to a show, Pat, that's like my wife telling me tonight is the night for action. I'm not holding my breath. Wow. Joey, that's an insult, man. You're calling me a hypocrite and a liar? You come here and support me. I'm not going to come out and support you one time when I can. Promise you I will. I promise. But obviously I couldn't be in two places at once, being in Indianapolis while you're winning the belt in New Jersey, man. So cut me some slack, Let's see. Bill Hartnett says the new draft room is really cool. Yep. They added some high-tech stuff to it. That was neat. I believe a number one wide receiver has the following traits. H5000 says, as you guys can see in his comment, can make any catch, under 4.40, yak and separation, sticky hands. Damn sure those traits, the film and due diligence agree. I hear that, 5,000. I hear that. Don't dislike your criteria there. G-Men says, if we don't take our quarterback this year, we'll be in purgatory for years with a poor quarterback draft next year, and teams very rarely allow good quarterbacks to hit the market. We'll end up paying DJ again because there's no one else. Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a scary place to be, right? It feels like where the Giants already are. What about Penix? What did they think of his combine, says Pierce. I have to be honest with you, David. I don't know yet how high the Giants are on him specifically. I know that people in the league are excited about what he can do. And I also know that it's a reality that several teams are scared of his injuries. Like, it's something that they're having trouble getting around mentally about. Listen, I love the kid. I think he can play, but I can't overlook this, right? So because of that, I think you're going to see there's going to be situations where one team views him as a, second, third round risk, kind of take a flyer on, high ceiling, but a risk involved. And then you got to look at, there's going to be teams who say, no, he's a first round talent. And because of what we already have around our quarterback room and maybe another veteran we already have, but he can also help us once he's ready, and he might be ready sooner than some other guys. There's going to be somebody who likes him in the mid to late first, early second. So I think he's a polarizing prospect, really. All right. Let's see. Michael says, is there any chance we get JJ at 6? Certainly a guy they're doing a lot of homework on, but and it looks, I see Super Unknown saying, are the Giants really going to draft JJ McCarthy? So you guys are here. You guys are, kind of asking the same question. I'm not saying they're definitely going to draft him for sure. And I'll get back up to these other questions here, but I just think that, it's hard to ignore the strong homework they're doing on him and his potential fit in what they're looking at from a quarterback development and, takeover, side of like how he would profile as that rookie who's not quite ready yet, but you can school him, learn him, teach him, develop him, and have him take over eventually. The top, like I said, the top 10 McCarthy stuff, I don't see it, but a lot of people in the league do. So, I guess there's a possibility it's going to happen or right around the top 10, which is very interesting to me, given all the strong position players that exist in this draft too. Jacob says, any idea who they prefer on the O-line? Do they like Powers Johnson from Oregon? Don't know. I haven't heard buzz about Powers and the Giants yet. I do know that Isaiah Adams is a guy that they met with twice at the Senior Bowl and we're showing a lot of interest in at guard. Again, the guard position is something the Giants are really zeroed in on in both free agency and the draft. I think anybody who profiles as a strong NFL guard in the draft and people at the top of that market, especially guys who can get out in space and be, athletic and punishing, are people to take a look at. I'll do a little bit more work on Powers, though. OG says Joe Shane and Brian Dable have to win now. How are they going to do that with Daniel Jones? That's a great point. OG's bringing it today. Thank you, OG, for all your comments and contributions today. Remember, guys, if you want to purchase a super chat or a super sticker, you can pay money to have your comment highlighted and elevated to the top of our chat. I will address it immediately rather than staying in the queue from top to bottom. It's a great way to help to support what we do here on Talkin Ball and building our community. If you don't want to buy a super chat or super sticker, no worries, but it would still help us if you press the thumbs up, the like button that we are going, as we are going right now live on YouTube, on the PL on NFL YouTube channel, because the live engagement and those likes as we are live helps build and essentially push to the YouTube users out there who don't know about the community we've built here yet, what we are doing, all the live streaming, and all the great conversation and dialogue that we're having about your team. So thank you so much. And remember, you can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at PL on NFL. Those are my initials, at PL on NFL. I'm on Threads as well. And then on X, I am P Leonard NYDN, where you can find most of the times if I'm breaking news, I'm doing it there. But sometimes I'm doing it on Instagram. Sometimes I'm doing it on TikTok. Sometimes I'm doing it right here on the YouTube channel, where we are continuing to build out more offerings and more abilities for you guys to interact and us to communicate, just like with now me using the kind of the StreamYard platform to host this and have your guys' questions highlighted, and it brings it more to life what we're doing here. What do you think of the Tulane quarterback as a third-round quarterback? Yeah, I think, it's not out of the question that they go in that direction. The guy who stood out to me mid-round is Spencer Rattler, now from South Carolina. Now, he's 6'1", which is not tiny, but it's not the profile of the quarterback that the Giants typically go after and draft. So size does matter at that position. But to me, no, Michael, the quarterback that stood out to me in the mid-rounds, there were two. It was Rattler and Joe Milton. I know people are skeptical of Joe Milton, believing that he's not the same player in games that he is in practices. But I'm just saying that's a guy with the size and also the ability who is more of a mid-round prospect. But Rattler stood out to me. Super says, also, what do you think Joe Shane's shelf life is on the Giants if he messes up this draft? We have so many needs. I would like Neighbors, but it looks like LA will get him. The Chargers will get him if they don't go offensive line there. A lot of excitement about this O-line class, and we all know that. Sorry, just looking at, Jason Kelce announced he is retiring from the NFL, from the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's good news for Dexter Lawrence and the interior of the Giants defensive line. And, also a loss from the NFL of, a great leader in the NFC East and player. And certainly something that is going to impact the NFC East and the Giants. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles are always hammering that offensive line and reinforcing it, but that's, you don't replace guys like Jason Kelce. So that's a very noteworthy in both the league and in the NFC East. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN also just reported that the Panthers are expected to trade or release veteran corner Dante Jackson. That's something I wanted to bring up too, real quick, and we'll get right back into the queue. But when you're talking about what are the Giants going to do as far as on the trade market and that kind of thing, like Joe Schoen has relationships throughout the league, but Dan Morgan, the new GM of the Carolina Panthers, and Shane know each other very well. And so, I would think that those are two guys who, if they can find a way to help each other, they would. I don't know of any specific thing developing right now, but I'm just saying, as there's a lot of talk about, will this team move up? Will this team trade? Will this team do this? Right? Like Brian Burns is a guy that if he doesn't get signed in Carolina, would get tagged most likely there. The Giants are in the edge rusher market, right? It's just what you see the Carolina Panthers release a guy at corner, which is a position where the Giants have needs, whatever it is. Like Carolina is just a team to watch that I know that Shane and Morgan are close, and I could see them doing business together. Let's see. Hunter says, what you think about that Xavier guy out of Texas? Could he be a second round guy for us if he fell that far? We'll see if he's viewed as attractively as a wide receiver who could help a team as much as, listen, speed matters, and that's key. But would that be a guy they take in the second round? They already have Wandale. Don't think he would be their player in that spot. But certainly Xavier Worthy, great to see him run that. I was there live. It's pretty cool. Hunter notes that Jason Kelce officially announced his retirement. Yep, that's big news. OG says only quarterback coming out next year that might be good is Sanders from Colorado. Pat, can you please tell me what other team was interested in drafting Daniel Jones when the Giants did? What were they thinking? A lot of noise came out that there were other teams that would have if the Giants didn't, but no one named ever specifically that was going to. So Caleb to Chicago has become the worst kept secret since Saquon coming to the Giants in 2018, says Phil. That's funny. OG says, appreciate you, Pat. I appreciate you, OG. Thank you. Thanks for being here, guys. Love it. Any news on Adoree Jackson? Is he gone, says Hunter. Wouldn't surprise me if they move on from him. That's what I expect, but no new news yet, Hunter. I think stay tuned as we continue to do our reporting here on the team and on the league. And as we're about a week out from the tampering period officially getting underway, this is definitely all going to ramp up. DJ says, how do you feel about signing A.J. Dillon in free agency? Wouldn't be my first pick there, DJ. Certainly a guy who can help you on the goal line, short yardage, powerful. I think the Giants would, be more interested in a guy who can help them in space. You want pass protection too, but I think that if you watch it, how they ran the offense in Buffalo with Josh Allen, now they had Josh Allen. So that's a key understanding. They had Josh Allen, but to me, A.J. Dillon, no, I think he's a compliment, but not a dude. Obviously that's something I would never say to his face because he's a monster and he would run through me. Danny says, do I think Daniel Jones stinks? I do. Danny, I don't think he stinks, but I do think that he has a ceiling, and I think that the Giants are aware of that. And I do think they're already planning for life without Daniel Jones. Danny says, was Mara to blame for the drafting and re-signing of Daniel Jones? With him and Dave Gettleman, that is certainly Eli Manning was at the forefront of their mind as they were drafting that player. Gettleman being essentially a Giants lifer in many ways and connected directly to ownership. That was Dave Gettleman's draft pick, obviously. But certainly, John Mara, Joe Schoen signed Daniel Jones to the contract, But John Mara was on the phone in the final hour with Daniel Jones before they got that deal done at the buzzer there. So listen, that's his prerogative. He's the owner of the team, but certainly was involved. G-Men says this team needs excitement instead of the same old players. Can you name any player except Saquon who fans get excited about watching? And that's the best argument for bringing him back again, is just who are you coming to see if you're not coming to see Saquon? But, to me, that's another decision about it's the ownership talking versus the general manager talking. Like, theoretically, if Joe Schoen's running this team, you feel like Saquon Barkley's on another team next year. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying, I think that ownership understands it from a marketability standpoint, from a leadership standpoint on the team, from the idea of building that legacy with the team and with the player and that connection to your own guy. That's something that ownership ideally would not want to rip the Band-Aid off of. Joey B wants to know what I know about the downfall of Philly. What I'll say about the downfall of Philly, Joey, is that I think there's a perception outside that Philadelphia and the Eagles are going to be fine, and that was an anomaly the second half of the season. But to me, I think much bigger issues at play there that are going to impact this coming season. I don't know how bad the team will be because of that or how that'll play out, but I think it starts with Jalen Hurts at the quarterback position and, needing to learn how to lead differently and better and be a guy who, when times are down, that he and Nick Sirianni, and it's the accountability from the top, and Howie Roseman. You hear conversations about Howie Roseman wants the coaching staff to play younger guys, and Sirianni necessarily wasn't doing that. Will he do it now? How will that play out on the field as far as being a competitive team as you're essentially rebuilding a large part of what you're doing? And with the Jason Kelce guy now leaving, that's a huge part of your leadership gone. So what I would say, Joey, is that it could get worse in Philadelphia before it gets better. But obviously, Howie Roseman has shown before he's very good at reloading. So that's something to watch for. But I think the Eagles are a team to continue to keep an eye on, because it's definitely a situation that I think is not even getting as much attention as it deserves right now for still having issues. Now, obviously, they made those hirings of Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. And, how much does that help, right? Because Shane Steichen's departure, especially from the offensive staff, really impacted Hurts in a negative way and the team in a negative way. So that'll have a lot to go with it too. Let's see. G-Men says, Pat, do you think things may be awkward between you and Coach Daboll next year after the piece you wrote about him and Wink? G-Men, that's a good question. First of all, I want to always remind people of this when they call it my story about Wink Martindale and Brian Daboll. That story was about Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka, Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen being on the headsets and watching the program and, listening in and all those things. That was a full-scale look at the problems. And it wasn't just Martindale and Daboll. But, just to correct the reference to what that story was about, because, at least a half of it was about how, a large part of a lot of the issues were centering around Daboll Kafka, and it wasn't just Daboll Martindale. Now that said, sorry, 1 second. I have to check something. Sometimes got to check the phone when we're doing this. Sometimes don't. All right. So let's see. Right. So you said, would things be awkward between me and Daboll? Not from my standpoint. I think you have a job to do, and ideally you would, the team would be winning games. Things would be positive, and you have an honest kind of, line of communication directly with people who run these teams. Now, from Daboll's perspective, I think it's going to be tough for him not to, listen, he's in a situation where the pressure is on. And so forget about him and me. Like it's not a personal thing. Like that was just reporting based on a major issue that went wrong. It wasn't about Brian Daboll. It was about, hey, there's something really wrong with the team. What's going on here? And it turned out he was at the center of a lot of these things, right? But it's not personal. And for Daboll, it's not even about me. It's about the pressure of the situation and trying to get your hands around how to function successfully and build something that's not only winning but sustainable. So awkward. I mean, I won't feel awkward. I'll tell you that. Joey B says they need to have a weekly show of Jason Kelce just tailgating. I think you're going to have a weekly show about Jason Kelce doing a lot of things. Let's see. Danny Duds says, in your honest opinion, how is Daniel Jones viewed in the locker room? Oh, the players like Daniel a lot, but no one's going to say this, but to your question, Danny, like there are, I think there's an understanding in the locker room about what Daniel is and maybe isn't, right? Like I think Kayvon's comment about Saquon Barkley should have gotten paid first, to me, like that kind of comment is born out of, it's intended as support for Saquon, but it's also indicating, how players feel about who deserve to get rewarded there, right? So I think that's a small window into, hey, we believe in Daniel as a competitor, but we also understand he has a limit, is the feeling that comes off from comments like that and the sense you get, even though no one's going to talk about it. Joey B says, is there Giants beat writer beef? Do you get along with Art and Patty Traina and Bobby and the Talking Giants guys and the NYG Rush guys? Nothing against anybody. And no, I have no beef. I do see when people either rile up fans against me when I report something that no one else has and they don't like hearing about their team. I notice when people take veiled shots at my reporting. I noticed when people subtweet me. And I noticed when people impugn my integrity. So if someone does one of those things, I notice and I, proceed accordingly. But I have no animus or resentment, and those things don't matter to me. I just keep doing my job. But I do notice those things, so take that for however you want. Hunter says Dex's box office. Danny Dudd says thanks for being one of the only unbiased Giants writers. Too many Mara minions. Thanks for saying that, Dan. I appreciate that. And listen, like I said earlier, or like I said actually to somebody this week at the Combine, just because I report sometimes things that the team necessarily wouldn't want out there, like the team's voice deserves to be heard, and they're one voice. They're one side of, like, let's say if there's a story about something, like they're one of the sides and one of the voices in those stories, and they deserve to be heard, right? So they're important in that regard, just like anybody else that you talk to about a story, and they deserve to be heard. Hunter says also change can be good. I get Rattler, but don't fit the normal quarterback profile, but who knows? DJ says I want Zach Moss and Calvin Ridley. Moss is another guy that Joe Shane mentioned, so he is a possibility. Hunter says, is DeAndre Swift a guy we could get? He's probably a guy someone's paying a little bit. I'm not sure the Giants would be paying a DeAndre Swift. Also, this is something to remember about Swift. I'm not saying he can't succeed somewhere else. But I think part of his success early last season in Philly was he came back home to Philly. And, whatever happened in Detroit, clearly him getting back home in a comfortable position, I think really helped him in Philadelphia. I'm not saying that he couldn't help, succeed in New York or Houston or somewhere else. But I'm not sure that, I just think that's something I'm wondering. I don't know. The situation seems similar to when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, says Jesse. How can we be hopeful that the same loop isn't happening? Jesse, I think that's why it's right to be skeptical. I think you bring up a great point. Like, again, why not be skeptical when you've seen this before and it didn't work out, right? Like, that is an extremely fair way to interpret these things. So going back to how you read coverage of the Giants, how people cover the team and what they say and don't say and all those things, like, you deserve it's warranted to be critical when you've seen it happen and not work out, right? Joey B says Kelce is in tears at his press conference right now. Of course he is, man. Emotional guy, and it's a big day for him and the organization. Joey B says, this is why I'm a Pat fan, but I'm a fan of everyone. We all want the same thing, win. Hey, man, winning's good for everybody, Joey. Winning's good for everybody. Never forget that. OG Knockout says, I think Daboll will be let go in 2025, but they'll keep Shane, especially if he hits on a quarterback. I don't want him, but I think Belichick will be the next Giants head coach. Certainly, there are 3 teams in the NFC East this year, the Cowboys, Giants, and Eagles, where the head coach is on the hot seat. I don't know if Bill Belichick will be one of the head coaches of those teams next year, but listen, if the Giants really struggle this year again and are bad and can't fix their problems that were ongoing last year, then Brian Daboll won't be the coach of the team in 2025. That's why, that was my prediction when I went on with the U Stadium guys. By the way, guys, thanks for having me on there. Really appreciated that. The U Stadium guys, go follow them. Did an interview with them. They put me on the spot, asked me for a hot take. I don't want people to get fired, but they asked me what they thought next year's record was going to be, and I said 6-11 again. And they said, will that come with a firing? And I said, if that happens, I think Daboll would get fired. So I know it kind of, got blasted out there. The clip came out. People were talking about it, but not trying to put any pressure on anybody. Just telling people, just answering a question. G-Men says some tough questions today, Pat, and answered everyone fully and honestly. Great stuff. Thank you for saying that, G-Men. You guys have been great, man. The engagement here just gets better and better every week. Tony Tran says, to Knockout's comment about Belichick, I doubt Belichick ever comes back to New York to coach. Word is he's been warning other coaches to avoid New York because of the front office makeup. Yeah, Tony, it's interesting. Like, we've talked about this a little on here too, is that it's true that I think there's a Belichick skepticism of some elements of the current Giants makeup, but also if you're bringing him in, truly, you're bringing him in to build the Giants into whatever he sees fit, right? I'm not saying he's a tyrant who needs that, but I'm saying that's what you're doing. If you hire the greatest coach of all time, you're not hiring him, but saying, but don't fix this or fix that, right? So, I think so. Tony, thanks for this that comment and answering that question. I'm not sure that means he will never come back. I think it just means under certain circumstances based on who's here, what can you change, what can you not, that kind of thing. R0B says, hey, Pat, how are you? What's the word swirling around about where the Giants will go at 6? They've kept people in the dark there, R0B. I'll say this. Quarterback's not off the board. I mean, and until it's off the board, it's on the board. That's how I see it. Joey B reacting to 6-11, not loving that. Hey, we'll see. We haven't been through free agency. We haven't been through the draft, right? So there's a lot to happen. Joey B said they have the nerve to raise season ticket prices after this sham of a season, man. Oof. Hunter says, this is why I love these. No sugarcoating. What we are is 6-11. Exactly what I think. Yeah. And also, like, for example, I know this is just two people talking, like, who knows? But John Middlecoff and Colin Cowherd, who really do good work at the volume, they had a conversation on their podcast today on Cowherd's podcast on March 4th. And they were talking about how with Washington getting competent leadership finally, that the Giants are in a really tough spot in a division where the Cowboys are really good and blow them out all the time. The Eagles, who knows? The Eagles are a wild card, like we talked about earlier. There could be more dysfunction coming there. But the Eagles typically are a good organization that kind of get it reset and do pretty well. And so if Washington gets its stuff together, the Giants are really up against it. So obviously they're going to try to make some moves here to be a force to be reckoned with as well. So we'll see. OG says, I'm a fan of people who keep it real no matter what. Online, Big Blue, authentic, and the beard, and your podcast, Keep It Real, Pat. Big fan. Yes, thank you so much. Authentic, a big fan of the show. Loving Authentic. Listen, anybody churning out content to talk Giants and talk NFL is a friend of the show here in some form. I'll tell you that. Let's see. Thanks for saying that, OG. Coming down the stretch here, we're close to an hour and a half. Pat, do you think the Giants make a play at Wilkins versus Hunter, putting him back with his best friend Dexter? Right, if Christian Wilkins hits the market. Good question there. I know Dex wouldn't hate that, that's for sure. But I do think they want an edge. I know Wilkins can bounce around and can play the edge too, but something to see. Joey says, I've got an exclusive story for you about a fan that I will DM to you. Interesting. Please DM. Michael says, at the end of the day, when we are on the clock, in your opinion, who's the name to be called? Michael, I don't usually say this, but I have a little bit less confidence in who they're going to take at 6 than I did prior to the combine. Like, in other words, I did get some reads on free agency and feel more confident about where they're looking in those directions and some of the players and on that market. But all I can say about number 6 is quarterback still on the board. Like, to me, the noise of J.J. McCarthy, the Drake May, and whether a number 3 trade is available. Neighbors feels to me like a position player that they would love. I said before on here that if I were them, I'd probably just take another offensive lineman until I fix the O-line. So I think all those things are on the board. But until quarterback's off the board, it's on it. To me, it's all John Mara guys. Same old result year after year. It has to be the front office, says OG. Hunter says, Pat, you should get Eli on the pod. We'll do that eventually. And no Mets, no Nets, no Jets checks in and says, what's up? No Mets, what's up, man? Thanks for joining in. Listen, I'm going to wrap this up now, actually, because I got some writing to do for the Daily News, some more reporting, some phones to work. But thank you so much for being on another one of these. Remember, if you didn't see already, we did 2 recent great interviews on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast with Justin Pugh and Xavier McKinney. Go check those out. More reporting coming from me on Saquon Barkley, Xavier McKinney, and the Giants free agent and draft needs and wants and desires and where they're headed. OG says, peace out. OG, thanks for contributing in such a big way to this pod and this live chat here on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard, live Q&A on the YouTube page at PL on NFL. That's my handle at YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and on X, I am P Leonard NYDN. Remember, you can purchase super chats and super stickers when we are live here to have your comment elevated to the top and answered first. If not, before you go now, hit the like button, the thumbs up. That live engagement helps YouTube push this out to other people who don't know we're doing this yet and reminds them what's going on in Giants land on our podcast. Much more coming, more offerings coming on the YouTube page. Doug, thank you. Hunter, thank you. Joey, thank you so much. We will be in touch soon on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast with more special guests to come. And on our next live chat, the plan for that is Thursday at 9 p.m. So Thursday, March 7th, 9 p.m. is when we will be coming to you. Check all my channels for more breaking news and more insight on what's going on. And thank you so much for continuing to help build this community. We'll talk to you soon, guys, from the Believe Network, from sponsored by Bet Online and Estate 98 Coffee and Esencia de Cafe from El Salvador, dates back to 1798. This is Pat Leonard signing off. Thanks again.